In this lesson, we're going to walk through writing some JavaScript and HTML code right into one of our blog posts on Blogger. So the first thing is, you can see I've got my browser window open and I've gone to Blogger, and you can blogger.com, and you can see here I can go right into my blog, and if I click that, I can select new post and I can start writing a new post. So we're going to go ahead and call this JavaScript Canvas example. And I can, if I make sure I'm in my HTML editing mode, I can go ahead and enter a canvas tag, and we're going to give this the canvas. We're going to give it an ID of my canvas. We're going to go ahead and make it 500 pixels wide and 200 pixels high. And we'll go ahead and give it a border just so we can see where it is. Now, on its own, the canvas doesn't really do anything. In fact, if we preview this, we can see it's just going to show up as a basic box, which isn't terribly exciting just yet, but we're going to do a few things to make it a little bit more interesting. So we want to add some JavaScript to our page. The first thing we want to do is enter a script tag. And this script tag is going to give us the ability to insert some JavaScript and run that right in line, so that we'll have the we'll be able to interpret and run code and add some interaction into our page. So one of the things that we might want to do here is get access to our canvas. So we're going to create this canvas variable. Our canvas is equal to document .get element by ID my canvas. And you'll notice here that my canvas matches the ID of the canvas element that we put up here. And this is basically just saying we want to access that HTML element, and we want to get the detail, or get that as a variable. Now, once we have that, we can actually start drawing on it. To draw on an HTML canvas, we need to use a context. So we're going to create a new variable, and we're going to get a two-dimensional context here. So using that context, we'll be able to draw onto our canvas. So one of the things that we might want to do, just to show how this works, we might want to use context.beginPath, and we might say context.rect. Then we're going to give it an x-coordinate, say 50, a y-coordinate, say 80, a width, which we'll say 200, and a height, which is going to be 100. Then we'll say context.fillStyle is equal to fill color, we'll say, let's make it a blue rectangle. Context, we'll make that filled in. Then context.strokeStyle, we'll go ahead and make it a gray line, and we'll type in, say, context.line width. We'll say it's 4 pixels wide, and we will go ahead and fill in a stroke. And now, if we take a look at this, if we see the preview, we should see our rectangle drawn in there. So we can really easily draw rectangles, but if you've seen some of these other lessons, you'll notice that we've actually wrapped some of these in objects. And one of the great things about doing things that way is that it makes our code a little bit more portable. This context.beginPath, the rect, the fill style, the fill, all of these things are very different from how we've interacted with drawing pictures or drawing rectangles in our coding with Chrome lessons. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this in our own object. So we're going to create a new function here. We'll say function create rectangle, and we will give that an x-coordinate, a y-coordinate, a width, a height, a fill color, a stroke color, and a stroke. Very, very similar to what we did with our coding with Chrome lessons earlier. Now we can say var rectangle is equal to new object, and we can start populating this object's properties. Rectangle.x is equal to x. Rectangle.y is equal to y. Rectangle.width is equal to width. Rectangle.height is equal to height. Rectangle.fillColor is equal to fill color. This gets a bit tedious. Rectangle.strokeColor is equal to stroke color. Rectangle.stroke is equal to stroke, and then we'll say rectangle.draw, and this is where we can actually make this interesting. We're going to use all of these parameters now to draw the rectangle, so that we're kind of hiding some of this context work, this context variable behind our object. And lastly, we'll return our rectangle. So if we want to actually fill this in, we'll just do the same things we did before. Context.beginPath, context.rect, this.x, this.y, this.width, this.height. Let's go ahead and scroll down a little so we can see. Context.fillStyle is equal to fill color. This.fill color. Context.fill, and that'll go ahead and fill in our rectangle. Context.line width is equal to this.stroke. Context.stroke style is equal to this.stroke color. Context.stroke. Now when we call the draw method on this rectangle, we'll actually be able to draw it. So now if we were to say down here, var rectangle is equal to create rectangle, say 20, 20, 380, red, green, 8, rectangle.draw. Now if we preview our file, there we get our rectangle. And the beauty of using the object is that now we can manipulate the object's properties and change the way our drawing looks. So this would be really good, if we wanted to actually, draw an animation or move our rectangle around our canvas or do anything interactive. If we wanted to do the same thing for lines, we could actually create lines too. Function create line, just like we did with coding with Chrome. X0, Y0, X1, Y1, stroke color, stroke. And here we're going to do a very similar exercise. Var line is equal to new object. Line.x0 is equal to x0. Line.x1 is equal to x1. Line.y0 is equal to y0. Line.y1 is equal to y1. Line.stroke color is equal to stroke color. Line.stroke is equal to stroke. And now where we get interesting, line.draw is equal to function. And we'll go ahead and fill in context.beginPath. We always start with this begin path. Then we'll say context.moveTo. So it's like we have a little cursor on the screen, and we just want to position it at this.x0, this.y0. Then we want to say context.line2, this.x1, this.y1. Context.line_width is equal to this.stroke. Context.stroke style is equal to this.stroke color. Let's go ahead and get rid of that unnecessary paren there. Context.stroke. And now that should fill in our line. If we were, we'll go ahead and return our line at the bottom of our function. So now if we were to build a line, we should be able to draw that line on the canvas as well. But let's say we want to actually deal with some animation. So we can actually build a function into our JavaScript here that will allow us to move this around. So I'm going to go ahead and create a function. I'm going to call it move. And what our move function is going to do, similar to other lessons that we've had, it's going to set a timeout that's going to call the move function again in approximately 50 milliseconds. So we want to use, we'll say rectangle, the rectangle we already have used, the rectangle that's been declared right here. We'll say rectangle.x plus equals 2. And then we'll say set timeout. We'll need to draw it, rectangle.draw. And then we'll say set timeout move 50. And then just to make sure that's called, we'll call move down here at the bottom. We'll go ahead and preview our file. And you'll notice we've got the same problem we had before. We're not actually clearing the screen. But fortunately, clearing the screen should be very easy using the canvas. We'll just go ahead and create another function. We'll call it clear screen. And for clear screen, we will just use context.beginPath, context.rect00. Now Canvas has a width property as well as a height property. And that allows us to understand exactly how wide and how high the canvas is. And we can use the fill style of white. And then we'll just fill in our rectangle. So now, before we draw it, if we clear screen and preview our work, it'll look like our rectangle is slowly moving across our canvas. So this works pretty well. This should demonstrate how we can interact with the canvas and how we can draw pictures on it. But it'd be really cool if we could actually start clicking on the canvas and having it, for example, like maybe we want to drop rectangles into the page. So if we want to drop rectangles, the first thing we should do is create an array to hold all of those rectangles we're going to drop. So we'll create a rectangles array here. And that's just going to hold every rectangle that we drop onto the page. And I'm going to go ahead and write a onClick handler for our canvas. And this is going to allow us to handle clicks on the actual canvas. So now we're going to have to do a couple of things that are not going to be too obvious right at first. Now we could use just click or evt.x, evt.y, but that's going to give us some odd results here. Just to see what I mean here, let's go ahead and try it. So we'll say var rectangle is equal to create rectangle, evt.x, evt.y, and we'll go ahead and make it a 10 by 10 rectangle. It actually makes it a square, I guess. We'll give it a white fill, a black stroke, and say 2 pixels wide for the bounding line, the stroke there. And if we add that to our rectangles array, so that'll add it in. And now if we go down to our move function and we change our move function, so we'll say first we'll clear the screen, and then we'll put in a for loop for var I equals 0, I is less than rectangles.length, I plus plus. We'll go ahead and say rectangles I, so we're going to iterate through all of these rectangles in the array. So we're going to start with 0, then go to 1, 2, 3. So I is just going to give us each one of the rectangles in sequence. We'll say rectangles.y plus equals 2. So it'll be like we're dropping rectangles out of the sky. And then we're going to draw those rectangles. So now if I haven't made any syntax errors, and I think we'll be okay, let's go ahead and remove our initial rectangle here. We'll go ahead and comment that out. Now when we call this, we should be running this code so that every time we click, my mouse is popping up there. You'll notice something here. We're not actually seeing things. So let's go ahead and make sure that we're actually getting these on-click events. So the first thing we can do to understand that is we can say console.log, and we can say evt.x is the x coordinate, console.log evt.y is the y coordinate. And that'll allow us to at least see that this function is being called. So let's go ahead and preview again. And we're going to go ahead and look at we'll go to View, Developer, JavaScript Console, so that we can see here. There's a couple of things that came up as we were loading, but we just want to see if I click on my canvas, is it actually doing anything? And you can see here we're not actually getting any events. So that's probably not good. What's probably happening here is that we're not actually going to see these until we publish. So let's go ahead and publish our post. Now we can actually go and view it. And if we look at our JavaScript console now, we've got a syntax error. That's probably one of the reasons we're having issues. If I click on this, well, you can see it's actually dropping these on, but we're not actually getting those rectangles. Those rectangles aren't showing up. And one weird thing is if I click at the top left here, which would really be 0, 0, you see it's actually giving me a lot of additional values there as well. So it's not just coming up as 0, 0. So we've got a couple of issues. Let's go ahead and trace that first one. Rectangle is not defined. So we've got a problem over in our code. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. is not defined. Probably happened right here. So let's go ahead, instead of calling rectangle.draw, we'll call rectangles I.draw, because we want to draw the rectangles from our array. Since we've already removed our rectangle variable, that's not actually going to do anything. So let's go ahead and update that, and we'll refresh our page. And we'll click, and here you can see now that we fixed that problem, we can see the squares moving, but there's a problem. You know, they're not coming up where I'm clicking. They're coming up actually quite a ways off from where I'm clicking. And if I scroll the page, you'll see they actually show up in a totally different spot, offset from where I'm clicking. And that's because this is actually working off of the page XY coordinates instead of the canvas's XY coordinates. So this poses a bit of a problem that we need to figure out for this particular case. But fortunately, it's not too hard. We're going to go back in and edit this, and when we run our onClick function here, we're going to just translate these coordinates. So we know this is working. We don't need this code anymore. We're going to go ahead and we'll use a variable called bounds, and we'll set that equal to canvas.getBoundingRectangle. Now this is going to tell us exactly where our canvas is located in the page. So if we want to get the actual x and y coordinates, we'll use var x is equal to evt.x minus bounds.left. And left will be the left, where the x coordinate, where the left side of that canvas is. We can also use var y is equal to evt.y minus bounds.top. And that'll give us the top, the y, the coordinate of where the top of our canvas is. And what that actually ends up doing is, because we're giving the page coordinates but we're subtracting this value, so you know, let's say we click down here somewhere where maybe the xy value is 200 200, but our canvas is at 100 100, it actually moves that position better so that this x and y coordinate correspond to our canvas instead of the overall page. So now we'll pass in xy 10 10 white black 2. Now if everything goes according to plan and we haven't made any errors, let's go ahead and update our code. We'll refresh and we will start clicking. Oh, so we've got another error here. Canvas.getBoundingRectangle, and that's actually because I wrote the function name wrong. It is actually not getBoundingRectangle, it is getBoundingClientRect. There we go. That should fix our problem. Now if we refresh and we click, we should see these nice little rectangles dropping out of the page. So if you take, you know, one thing that I don't like is, if you notice when I click, they're actually showing, that's pointing to the top left corner. So if we go back into our code, let's go ahead and edit it one last time. If we use x minus 5 and y minus 5, that'll actually allow us to drop these in the center of the rectangle. So if I refresh, you'll see that actually pops up right now in the center. So it looks a little bit better to me. Now, if you take this, you can actually use this and adapt this so that you could make lots of animations. So based on your clicks, based on other events, you could have other things triggering. But if you want to go further, what you need to do is make sure that anything you're trying to manipulate, anything you're trying to expect to draw over and over again, you want to put that in your move function down here so that it's included as this is called over and over again. But otherwise, you should be able to create lines, you should be able to create rectangles, and make your own animations and respond to your own user input. So thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed, and I hope you're able to add some interesting interactive pieces to your blogs.